All right, everybody, we'll go ahead and get started here. It looks like people are still kind of trickling in, so the first few minutes of this will just be a quick introduction, and then we'll dive in. Um, so just a quick agenda for what we're going to talk about. Like I said, we'll start with a quick introduction. We'll talk about what's new in Zeplay. The latest version is 4.2. The things we're going to cover are a few things that are new in 4.2, but also just a couple things that were in the previous few versions of the Zeplay software before that. There are a lot of people who still have not updated their software, so a lot of this is new information or these new features that a lot of customers haven't seen yet. So after that, we'll talk about just the basics of how you upgrade your software. If that's something you're interested in, we'll touch on the upcoming Zeplay webinars that we have, and then hopefully we'll have a few minutes left over at the end for question and answer. So I think looking at who's in the webinar right now, most of you know me. I'll start my video here so you can see my smiling face. I am Brandon McKenzie. I am the owner, chief cook and bottle washer, lead developer of Zeplay. I created Zeplay about 10 years ago in order to solve a problem at a local community TV station that I was working at. And since then, Zeplay has gone on to be sold worldwide. We've got customers primarily in the U.S., but spread around the globe. And it's been a very cool ride to do this and to get to see, to sit in the stadium and watch all the fans watch the instant replays from the system that you built. So many of you know the story that, Zeplay was originally part of Tightrope Media Systems. It's now an independent company. We're still, cordial with all the guys at Tightrope, but we don't have a business relationship with them any longer. So that's that. I will jump back into the slide deck here and we can touch base on a couple more things here. So as far as what's new in Zeplay, it was pointless to go back to the slide deck because that's all there is for the slide. So what's new in Zeplay is so Zeplay 4.2 is the latest version of the software. This is available now. It came out earlier this year. I think about May is when we finally released 4.2. And it has several features. So I'm going to kind of jump around between different versions and I'll kind of highlight what's new in what version. So version 4.0 was the first version of the software that Zeplay released as an independent company. So anything before 4.0 would have been Tightrope's Zeplay software. Obviously, it's largely the same team working on it, and there's not a huge amount of difference between the two. It just kind of gives you an idea of if you have a customer or if you're a customer who hasn't updated since we became an independent company, then anything I mention in this webinar is going to be new software for you. If you're running a newer version of the software, then some of the things will be new and some of them you'd already have. So the biggest thing we did in Zeplay 4.0, which came out about 2 years ago, is that we now allow you to queue multiple sequences. So right now I've got my Zeplay here. I've got a quick little sequence that I built. So I can just queue this up on my red channel. I can roll this sequence and play that. That's been how Zeplay's operated since the beginning. You could queue sequences on the red channel. What's new in 4.0 is that I can now also queue the same sequence on additional channels as well. So now I have that sequence rolling on my red channel. I just queued it on my green channel, and now I can roll that same sequence there as well. Or I can roll different sequences as well. So I could, go in here, make a new sequence, throw a couple clips in that. I can queue that up on my blue channel and roll that there as well. So now you can have a sequence queued on any of the channels. You can have sequences queued on multiple channels. You can have the same sequence queued in multiple places. So it gives you a lot more flexibility on that. I've seen a lot of customers, it's pretty rare that you're going to actually be running multiple sequences at the same time. Where this is really convenient is a situation where I need to roll something off of one channel. So say for the very beginning of your show, you're going to go live, you're going to roll your open with your sponsor logos and things like that, come back to do your kind of beauty shot of the venue, and then you're going to go into like a pre-produced segment from there. In the previous versions of Zeplay, you had to queue up the first thing, play it, and then frantically try to queue up the next thing, in that beauty shot. But now you can have that queued on another channel. So I would just roll the first thing off of red, then I'd roll the second thing off of green. Gives me that flexibility. And I don't necessarily have to go anywhere else in between. I can roll from red and then the director can dissolve to green and I can roll that as well. So that's been a really powerful feature. Like I said, that came out in Zeplay 4.0. So that's actually been around for a little while now. The moving on, the next thing that I wanted to talk about is watch folders. So one of the common use cases in Zplay is that we'll see customers who have multiple Zplay systems kind of operating together. So for example, for a hockey arena, you might have 2 or 3 Zplay systems just because you have so many cameras and you need to capture all that action. So what we'll do, what a lot of people need to figure out then is how do I move content back and forth uh, between those systems quickly and easily. So the watch folder is a really important way of handling that. And what the watch folder allows me to do is that in the Zplay preferences now, you can go in and you can say, I can define a watch folder here. So I'm going to say anything that gets put into this folder on eWatch is going to get automatically imported into the game. So if we jump over here, I've got some convenient files. I can just grab a file. This could be a file that I edited on a different system. It could be a Zplay machine exporting a file. It could be, Final Cut or anything like that. But I'm just going to place a file in that folder, jump back over to Zplay, and we watch down in the file bin here. We'll see it already imported that, validated that file, and imported it into the game. So the example would be if I have 2 Zplay systems, typically one of those operators is going to be doing just replays. They're doing nothing but replays. The second operator is going to be doing replays, but they're also going to be editing my highlights and trying to figure out, the rollouts and things like that. So then what you'll end up doing, or what I would suggest you do, is you can share the network drive. You can map this drive as a network drive on the network and say that this watch folder is shared. And then the person who's running replays only, they're going to export content into that folder across the network. And then the person who's doing the replays, or sorry, who's doing the highlights, is going to see that automatically get imported. So fundamentally, it hasn't changed a whole lot of how this works. We used to do the same thing, share that drive over the network, export stuff from one machine onto the other machine, but it relied on the operators communicating to each other to say like, okay, I'm exporting that thing. Okay, it's there. Now go find it, and it's called this, and you can go get it. Whereas now it's going to be operator A exports something, it's going to show up on operator B's machine, within a few seconds, and it's going to automatically be, it will always be the last thing in the file bin window, and it's automatically going to be selected. So at that point, the operator can just export it, it pops up over here, and all I need to do as the person who's doing highlights is hit add to sequence and bring that in. So it makes it a lot easier to share that content between machines, or to get, edited content out of your craft editing in Final Cut or Premiere or whatever you might be using, so that you can turn that around quicker with less communication and less steps in there. While we're talking about the file bin, there's a few other things that have happened in there too. Is we added some of this filtering capability, which is similar to what we have for the playlist. So now I can search the file bin and kind of filter that down. We've seen a lot of customers who are using more and more externally produced content. As we kind of originally conceived of Zplay, we thought like, well, maybe you'll have 10 files that you'll need to bring in for a show. We've seen a lot more people who are running 50, 60, 70 files in the course of a game. And it gets harder and harder to find things. So we added that filtering ability there. We also added macro capabilities for the file bin. So if you don't use macros in Zplay, you should really look into it because it's a very powerful feature. But for example, here I can go and I can say, when I hit the F key on my keyboard, I want to send a command to the file bin. And the command I want to say add to sequence. So that's going to add the item that's currently selected to the sequence that's currently selected. For example, like there's other options in here too. So I could say, in addition to just saying add that sequence, I can also say like set the search. So I can say for example, I have, say I have some commercials that I'm going to run, and those all have the word commercial in the file name that I got brought in from my, that my editor created for me. So I could have a preset search so that like when I hit F2 or whatever key I want, it searches for commercials. So it kind of gives me a way to do almost like having tabs in the file bin where I can have multiple different criteria pre-set up, and I can just switch back and forth between those in order to quickly and easily find things. And then just basic stuff as well. So you have other options as far as like selecting the previous file, selecting the next file. And then like import media is going to allow me to pop up a dialog to allow me to select a file. So I can just go here. I can hit G, that's going to pop up, let me select a file. I can go here and import this. And then I can just hit, I used F to say add to sequence. So I can just add that to sequence. So for example, with the watch folder functionality, if I grab another file here, I'll just copy this and paste it into my watch folder as an example. We'll go here. We'll wait for, just take a few seconds. Zplay validated it, and now it automatically got selected there. So now I can just hit F and drop that right into the sequence with one click as well. So that's the example where I have multiple people, one person exports a clip off of their Zeplay machine, it pops up in the other Zeplay machine automatically, and I can hit one key and bring it into my sequence, and it's ready to go. So that makes that scenario of having multiple Zeplay machines working together to produce a game much more powerful. Along the same lines, in 4.1, we also added a feature where we improved the speed of exporting. This one's actually kind of a hard thing to demo for Zeplay, but what it boils down to is that the original Zeplay software from version 1.0 to version 3.1, or sorry, to 4.0, always exported in real time. So if you had a 1 minute clip that you needed to export, it would take about a minute to export it. Practically speaking, most of the stuff that you're going to export in sports replay is going to tend to be shorter than that. I mean, a lot of times you're exporting the individual replays, which are going to be, 5 to 10 seconds. So 5 seconds to export a 5-second clip isn't so bad. Where we saw a problem, or where this feature came from, was when you're exporting your highlights for the game. You might have a 3 or 4 minute package of highlights for the whole game, and 3 or 4 minutes there, that takes a long time. The other scenario is if you're using Zeplay more for kind of ISO recording, and you're say you're doing an entertainment shoot with a concert or something like that, you might need to export out a 40-minute clip or something like that. So what we added was faster exporting, and it depends on the model of Zeplay system that you have. So if you have an original Zeplay system, kind of the first generation, those are still going to export at 1x or real-time speed, just because there's not enough hardware resources in order to export faster on those machines. With the newer systems, the middle age systems are going to export at 2x real time, and then the latest couple versions of the Zeplay hardware are going to export at 4x real time. So now my 40-minute clip that previously would take 40 minutes to export is now going to take 10 minutes to export. So no change to the export operation within Zeplay. Everything still happens in the background. I'm still able to do replays while I'm exporting. I'm still able to do sequences, edit sequences, everything like that. So that's always been one of the kind of core tenets of Zeplay, is that we don't want you to trade away features in order to do different things at different times. We didn't want to be a replay system where you have to use 2 replay channels in order to play a sequence that has crossfades, or you have to use a replay channel in order to export content. We weren't willing to make those sacrifices. So Zplay's always been built with this idea that everything's available to you all the time. So now you can export things at 4x real time while you're still recording, you're still doing replays, you're still doing sequences, and you haven't lost any capabilities as part of that. So as I mentioned, that is a hardware dependent feature. So depending on what hardware you have, you'll get different export speeds, but that just happens automatically kind of behind the scenes. There's no operator intervention required on that. So moving on to the next thing, now we're talking about Zeplay 4.2. So this is the newest software that just came out. This was released in May of this year, right as the pandemic started, of course. So as of now, there's actually very few customers who've upgraded to this. If you're a dealer who sells our products, you can take note of that, because it's pretty likely that your customers haven't upgraded yet. Obviously, a lot of people aren't working at the moment, so we totally understand that. But as far as what's new in 4.2, there's basically 3 big things. We did just some kind of neatening up of the user interface. This is a lot of stuff that we got from our existing customers, just some feedback there. So one of the examples is the play bar window here in Zeplay. I can now right click on this and I can set the duration that this should show. So previously this always showed 10 minutes of video. Depending on what sports you're doing, that might make sense, but you might have, if it's a fast-paced game, 10 minutes can be a really long time. For a football game, 10 minutes is a whole lot of plays. In a baseball game, it might not be so bad. It depends. So this gives you the option to pick that in, in 1 minute increments. How long do you want that to see? And that's just going to change the scale of the overall play bar here. So if I say 10 minutes, I'll see a lot more content, and everything will be a lot smaller. But that's just an easy preference there. We cleaned up the play bar interface a little bit too, just made it a little bit more. We tried to make more usable space and less kind of chrome around it, because there was a lot of ornamentation around it, and the meat of what you need in order to move on and get your job done was kind of smaller than we wanted it to be. The other thing that actually came out, I think in 4.1, that a lot of people don't know about is this button over here allows me to copy an entire sequence. So now I can just copy this sequence, and now I can go to my other sequence here and I can paste that in there as well. So it gives me a quick and easy way to combine 2 sequences. The example I always talk about with operators is pretty common workflow is that I'm doing a football game and I'm going to have, at halftime, I'm going to roll a highlights package of the first half of the game. And then at the end of the game, I'm going to roll a highlights package of the second half of the game. But I might want to have a combined highlights that has the first half and the second half together. Maybe I'm going to put that out on social media. Maybe we're just going to archive it or something along those lines. So the thing you can do now is I can have my sequence for my first half and the sequence for my second half, and then I can just copy those and combine those into one sequence with a couple of clicks. And all the transitions and everything just comes along with that. So it makes it a really quick and easy way to combine those. The other example that I've done with that is where if I'm going to make some changes to the sequence and I'm not positive if it's going to work out, I can copy that sequence, make a new sequence, paste it in there, and now I basically just have a backup copy of it. So I can, maybe it's 5 minutes until I need to have this rollout done. I have an idea for how I want to change it. I'm not sure if I'm going to have time to get it done, and I'm not sure if I'm going to like what I come up with at the end. So I can make a backup copy of that and then just make that, make the modifications in one of them, and then I still have a backup copy that I can roll if it doesn't work out. So the next feature I wanted to mention is that we doubled the amount of macros available on the controller, which sounds more impressive than it is. But the macro system, as I mentioned earlier, you have the option to trigger macros from any key on the keyboard, the control panel, from GPI events, and then also from internal triggers. And these are almost always just used for internal testing within Zeplay. But these are basically things that, when something happens within Zeplay, like someone hits the button for start play, it gives you the option to say, okay, do something. Again, most of the time these get used for us just for Q&A at Zeplay. So, but if I go to the controller, now I have options for, so there's two buttons, macro 1 and macro 2 on the controller. I now have buttons for shift macro 1 as well as shift macro 2 as well. So a lot of times I'll use these for kind of alternate versions of the same thing if they're going to go to two different things or they need to do slightly different variants of the same thing. Just makes it easier to remember what's what. But now you can do 4 different things from the Zeplay control panel directly. And also remember that in Zeplay, the macros are not just a single action. I can add multiple steps to this. So I can have it, mark an in point, mark an out point, tag a play, and export it. It can all happen as one key press. And now with the shift option as well. So, so that's that. One other macro note that got added recently that a lot of people don't know about is that we added a macro option that allows me to open an item in the editor. So if I go to a sequence here, I can just hit, I believe I have it set as shift macro 1 on my control panel, and now it's going to open up the first item in this sequence in the editor. So that makes it really quick and easy. If I want to go in here and trim this, I can say, okay, there's my in point. Let me pull up the next clip. There's my next clip, and I'm going to go there, and I'm going to, maybe edit my in point. Maybe I want this just before the catch. We'll say right there. I'll mark my in point there. So it makes it a lot easier to get in and out of the editor. Along those lines, also, I don't have a good visual aid for this, but on the control panel itself, there's now a button. If you have your Zeplay control panel in front of you, right next to the time display key, there is a button that is unlabeled on most control panels, but that now switches back and forth between what you're controlling and the editor. So I'm in the editor here. I can go in and I can adjust my in and out points. I can hit that key and I'm back to controlling all 4 of my playback channels. This is really convenient because it means that if I'm working on a sequence, I'm working on my rolled out for the end of the game and they score a touchdown and I need to do a replay right now, I can hit that key, I'm back to controlling replays, I can do my replay. Once I'm done with that and I want to finish up editing that sequence, I can just tap that key and I'm right back to controlling the editor exactly where I left off. So it makes it really quick to do that context switching back and forth between the editor and the replay channels. And then the last big feature in 4.2 that I was going to highlight is the biggest feature that we did in 4.2, and that is that you can now export to multiple locations. So if you've used Zeplay in the past, the way that exporting worked in Zeplay before is that there was basically one settings page that had all your settings for exporting. So for example, say I'm doing a football game, and at the end of the game, I need to export out all the highlights for my own purposes for the station, and maybe they want that in ProRes because that's what the editors always use. And then I also need to export out the highlights and give them to the guy from the news media who's there. They want their files in XDCAM. You could do that in Zeplay before. You had to go in and manually change all the settings and make sure you got everything right every time, which if you got 2 different destinations isn't the end of the world, but if you've got 5 or 10, it becomes a lot bigger hassle. So in 4.2, we now added the ability to define multiple presets. So the original one here is just default HD. That's the one that kind of comes with the system. I can go in and edit that, and you can see in this preset, I can define a name that's going to get shown to the operator. I can tell it where I would like it to place these files. I can tell which codec it should use in order to generate those files. And then I have my other settings as well as far as my pre-roll, my post-roll, which plays should be used and which angles of those plays should be used. So this makes it really quick and easy. So say, but as I was saying, we'll go there. That's my default one. And then if we make a new preset, we can say for the news, we're going to export that. We're going to put it in. We'll go to Zeplay archives, and then we'll make a new folder in here called news. And then we'll say, okay, they want their files as XDCAM. So we'll select XDCAM EX. And maybe they want a little extra pre-roll because they need to know, they're going to do a little more editing, and we just want to make sure we never have to re-export something if they got the wrong thing. So we'll just save that, and now I have multiple presets. I can select which preset gets used by default. That's basically like if the operator just tells Zeplay like, hey, export, which one gets used. And you'll see how that works in a second here. And then so I'll save that. So now if I go here and I have this file, I want to export this, I can click export. And I get the option now to select which preset I want. It's going to select the default one by default. So whichever one I had selected previously there to say use this preset as by default, that will be selected when this screen opens. And then I have the option to kind of adjust these settings if I need. So maybe the preset is set to say only the selected play and only the good angles, but maybe right now I actually want all the angles. So I can just select that. I can adjust my pre-roll, anything like that. And then I can just hit archive. That's going to start exporting. As I said earlier, Zeplay does all of its exporting in the background. So I'm still operating, I'm still recording, I'm still doing all my replays, and Zeplay is just exporting that stuff silently. And there we go, it just said it's finished exporting that clip. So now if I wanted to, so that exported it using my default codec. Maybe I also want to export that for the news. So now I'll just go in here, I'll select news. We see that it applies the pre-roll settings I had as well. So I can just hit export on that. And then, of course, the gods of demos are not smiling on me, and it failed for some reason. I'll investigate that later. But I can export that to multiple places. Let's change the codec on that just to see, because I think it's probably an issue with this particular server. Do DVC Pro instead. And if this doesn't work, then we're going to give up. So we'll go there. Okay, so now it's exporting that file. And it should just take a few seconds. It's only a 7-second clip, so it should be pretty quick and easy. So when you export plays, you get that screen where it pops up and asks you which settings you want to use. When you export sequences, there's not really any settings to apply in that case. The sequence gets exported, it takes all of the clips, it puts them all into one file together. Everything, it happens as if you'd played it live on air. So it's going to have all the same transitions and speed changes and things like that, but it just creates one file. So with the export now, if you have more than one preset defined, you'll see this little triangle icon to the right of export. If I click that, it's going to give me the options to pick which of the presets I want to use. If I don't click that and I just click the export button itself, it's going to use the default preset. So I can just hit that, it's going to export. Now, while that's still exporting, I'm going to go here and I'm going to say also export it to the news. So now we see there's 2 items remaining. So it's currently exporting the file using the default codec. Once it's done exporting that, it's going to start exporting the next file, which is using the codec that we set up for the news operation. So it makes it pretty quick and easy to have multiple presets there. We did also, I didn't mention this, but we did just add XDCAM as a codec option as well. So if you're interoperating with your local news station, that's far and away the most common codec that the world of news is using these days. And it makes it really convenient. You can give them that file in their normal kind of house codec. You can also bring those files back into Zeplay as well. So it's also a nice codec in that it's a fairly low bit rate. So if you have longer clips or you have a lot of clips or you need to move those files across the internet instead of SneakerNet mailing a drive back and forth or something like that, it's a 35 megabit file instead of 100 megabit. Was previously the lowest bit rate that you could do for high def in Zeplay. So more than halved the file size, which has been very convenient for a lot of our customers. So I'm going to jump back over to my slide deck here. That concludes kind of the majority of what the meat of the product. So the kind of next thing to talk about here is just how to upgrade as kind of a refresh for anybody who might have forgotten. We sell Zeplay updates in a couple different ways, but what it boils down to is that we do charge for software updates. So we sell, it's a software update contract. List price is $900 a year. That price actually just went down a little bit with our most recent price sheet. So that for $900 a year per Zeplay machine, that gets you the latest version of the software on the Zeplay system, as well as any software released within the term of that contract. So you don't have to worry that you're going to buy it and then a week later we're going to come out with new software. So you'll get that as well. The biggest thing to mention on that is that that's compatible with any Zeplay system. So the very first Zeplay systems that were sold, more than 10 years ago now, they can run this software. They can get all these features. They can do all these things. And that's a really powerful feature that we're really proud of with Zeplay, that we've been able to kind of keep that compatibility and keep things working and keep adding value to systems that have been out there for so long. The other options that you have as far as upgrades is that we offer something called Zeplay Care, and Zeplay Care is basically the software updates, but it also includes a hardware warranty. So that's available. That's only available on systems that have been sold within the last 5 years. So we can't offer the hardware warranty, unfortunately, on 10-year-old systems. So we will warranty them for out to 5 years after the date of their original manufacture. If you have an older Zeplay system that you'd like to upgrade, the other two options are we have what we call a hardware refresh and we have a hardware trade-in. And these are kind of variations on the same theme, but the idea is that you basically trade in your old Zeplay system and you get a newer Zeplay system instead. So with the hardware refresh, you get a brand new server. We reuse the Matrox video I/O card. That's kind of the heart of Zeplay. Also, coincidentally, the most expensive part of your Zeplay server. So that is a really economical option. It's very affordable. That gets you a R6 Zeplay system, which is not the current newest Zeplay model, but it's one model previous, significantly newer. It's all solid state storage. It's much quieter, much lighter. A much better system than the older 10-year-old Zeplay systems. The other option that we just introduced is a hardware trade-in. That is basically the same idea, except for that gets you a new R7 system. And then with that, because the hardware has changed and the form factors changed, we can't reuse the old parts. So you end up with a completely brand new system. And you basically get a discount in exchange for trading in your old Zeplay system. So that one, if you want the latest and greatest and the very newest hardware, that's the option. If you would like to do it as a more economical option, then the hardware refresh is still available as well. So that's that. We have a couple more webinars coming up. So what we're planning on doing here is we're going to do a webinar once a month. And the rotation is going to be, this webinar that we just did today is targeted primarily to existing users who've used the Zeplay system before. Next month webinar is targeting our resellers or interested resellers who would like to sell Zeplay. And then the month after that will be new users or sales prospects, kind of more of an introduction to the system and how everything works kind of from the ground up. And then we'll repeat that cadence. Every month there will be a webinar kind of in that same cycle. So we'll be sending out an email here shortly which has all these details as well. So you don't need to worry about writing it down too much right now, but just end of September will be the next one for resellers. And then end of October will be the basic training for new Zeplay operators. And then that's what we have for the presentation. So I do have some time here. I can answer questions if anyone has any. If you do have questions, there's an option in Zoom for Q&A. You can just go in and hit that. And we'll stick around for a few minutes. And then I also just, for convenience here, I put in information as far as how to contact us. So obviously, if you've gotten this far, you're probably on our email list. You probably know where our website is, but we do have a new forum that we've just launched. I'll be honest with you and say that there's not a lot of content on it right now. What we really need is some more people to start participating and start asking questions and start to get that discussion going. So that's just at forum.zeplay.tv. And then obviously for tech support and sales, you can always email us or call us. The information's on the screen there. And then the last thing I wanted to mention as well is that we just brought on a new manufacturer's representative lately. So we have some additional feet on the street working on selling Zeplay and getting more resellers signed up. So that company Channel Lists, contact information is there as well. They're serving basically the Western United States as well as British Columbia. So if you're in that region and you'd like to be introduced to them, I'm happy to kind of make that introduction. They'll be, they're out there and they're talking about Zplay day in and day out. So with that, if anyone has any questions, feel free to post them in the Q&A thing. And if we don't get anything in the next couple minutes, I will probably wrap this up. So thank you all for your time, and we look forward to speaking with you again soon.